My name is Lauren Connelly, and this is my partner,
I'm Delilah Daigle.
and this is Chase Day, and we are in the ARPSEC Center, October 17th, 2019 at 1:15. So, when and where were you born?
I was born in Cookeville, Tennessee on March 7th, 1990.
Okay. Your hometown, was it more of a rural or urban place?
It was more rural. It was kind of in the middle of like farming country, so.
Mm-hmm. So, your family, we know your dad was a lawyer and your mom was a stay-at-home mom. Can you tell us anything about your home? You said it was farm country, so did you have any farm animals?
We didn't have farm animals, but we did have a 35-acre farm, if you like to call it that. But like we had, my parents breed dogs, and they do that. They want to eventually get like horses, cows, pigs, things like that, so that way they can actually harvest meat and everything like that as well.
Cool. You also mentioned that you had siblings, 2 older brothers, 1 older sister, and 1 younger sister.
That's correct.
How much of an age difference was that?
Oh, goodness. Between my oldest sister, there's 10 years difference, and it's about 2 years in between each one of those.
Mm-hmm.
So the oldest would be 10 years difference and then 2 year difference between me and my youngest sister.
So were you closer to one of them, or were y'all all pretty close-knit?
We were all pretty close. My oldest sister was kind of like our second mom because she's a little bit older. But I was probably closest to my second brother, just because we grew up doing a lot of the same things. We're relatively close in age and everything as well.
Okay. Going back to high school, we know you played a lot of sports. Was there any one particular that you liked the most?
Really, lacrosse was my forte. That's what I kind of ended up finalizing doing. I know they played soccer and everything like that, but lacrosse was just the one that I excelled in the most. So I just took that and ran with it my end of my freshman year, beginning of sophomore year, and just kept going with it all the way through.
Mm-hmm. Were you offered any scholarships? Did you think about going to school to pursue lacrosse any?
So I was actually offered a scholarship to West Point through the Army. Unfortunately, I turned it down because I was like, I don't know if I want to go to school right now. I don't know if I want to join the military. And then 3 months later, I enrolled at school and did not accept that scholarship.
Mm-hmm. So you didn't go to college. What did you do right getting out of high school?
So right out of high school, I worked a lot. I worked for my father doing random construction work because we had rental properties. I was a lifeguard at a YMCA. I became a manager at the YMCA, doing anything and everything they asked me to. And then when I started back up school, I just continued working at the YMCA, and that was pretty much all I did up until I joined.
So when you finally had the idea to actually join the military, how did you tell your family? How did they take it?
So my parents always wanted me to join the military. Both of my parents come from military families. So when I told them, I was like, hey, I'm kind of thinking about this, they were ecstatic. They were jumping up and down, super excited because I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I didn't really think school was for me at that time. So when I told them, they were all on board for it.
Mm-hmm. You have a wife and you have kids.
Yes.
So when did you meet your wife?
My wife and I actually met in high school, but we never thought that we'd have any sort of relationship. We were just friends, took a lot of the same classes, things like that. And it wasn't until probably 3 or 4 years after high school that we first started dating and got engaged and everything as well.
Your child.
Just one.
So how old is the child?
His name is Roman. He's 3.
Okay. Did you have your child before you went into the military or once you were in the military?
We had him after I had been in for about 3 years.
Okay. Was it difficult being in the military and also trying to balance out having a family of your own?
Not necessarily. In the Air Force, they're very more business-oriented than they are military-oriented. So they set along like the guidelines like family comes first, then the mission, And so from there, you kind of figure out how to play life and military. So they kind of made it seem like your family was involved in the branch just as much as you were.
Okay, that's good. So having your wife be at home with your child and you in the military, how is her support system back home?
Her support system's always been great. Her and her mom are very close. Her father is very supportive of anything that she does. So on the family side, it was phenomenal. On her friend's side, it was just as well. She had a lot of friends who were very supportive of us being in the military, helping her with anything that they needed, especially once we had our child. They were always there to help us like cook and clean and try to help pick up like those loose ends that we kind of got caught up in everyday life.
I think we're going to move on to the next section now.
All right.
Which is your actual military service. And I'm going to be asking those questions. So first we're going to discuss your enlistment. How old were you when you enlisted in the Air Force?
Let's see. I was 22.
Okay. Did you feel any sort of way navigating being a little older than most enlistees?
On the contrary, actually, I felt kind of like right in the middle. Like I went to basic with kids who were 17 right out of high school, and I also had people in my basic training that were also like 34, 35.
Oh, okay, I see. So why did you decide to enlist in the Air Force?
To be frank, I did not like school. So I needed to make money to make ends meet before like my fiance, now wife, would have been able to survive. So I was like, well, what are the options that I have to be able to fill this up? And so we both kind of like talked about it, kind of talked to our parents and everything about it, and came up with the idea, well, what about the military? They help provide X, Y, Z. So what about this? And our family was like, it makes perfect sense for you to do it, so why not? And so that's kind of what just put me in the right direction to join the military.
Yeah, I definitely see that support from them. So what was the reaction of your friends and family or your wife? I mean, was there anything else besides happiness? Was there any worry or anything like that?
Not really. Again, it was a lot of just support, and like, we're glad you're doing something different with your life. Kind of gets you out there and kind of dabble a little bit in everything else, if you will. There was one friend who was just really upset, but it was mainly just because he was selfish and didn't want me to leave him.
Oh. So now I'm going to talk about your training. Your basic training took place in San Antonio, Texas, correct?
That is correct.
All right. How would you describe the atmosphere of training?
Everyone kind of makes it seem like basic training is this real hard thing to do. If you go in with the right mentality, it's not that difficult. You have to understand that you are there to learn and be adaptive. So if you go in with that mindset, it makes it so much easier instead of being like, oh, these drill sergeants are going to be yelling at me, pushing me to do this that I don't want to do. But if you go with the right mentality, it's a cakewalk.
Right. Perception is everything.
Exactly.
So how would you compare it to regular civilian life? Like, what was the differences?
The training?
Yeah.
The training really that makes it different was that you had certain expectations, certain timelines to meet. And, at that young of an age, you're just kind of floating free, kind of doing whatever you want to, whatever you can. This kind of put you on that, no, you have a timeline, you have to follow that timeline to be able to be successful.
I see. Is there any ways that you believe training changed you?
Definitely made me more goal-oriented and time management friendly.
Yeah.
So
it seems very much like a benefit in your mind.
Definitely.
Awesome. Do you feel like it prepared you for your time actually in the Air Force?
Yes. With that, kind of, when you're going through training, they teach you all of like the customs and courtesies, and down here in the South, it's like yes sir, no sir, yes ma'am, no ma'am. They kind of drill that into you, so that way you're showing the proper respect to the people that deserve it. Which is anyone higher ranking than you, even lower ranking, you still have to show respect. So that was the big thing that kind of they focus on for like younger people, is like you show everyone their due respect, and they'll give you the same.
I see how that's important. So what was your length of time actually in training?
In training, for basic training, it was 8 weeks, and then for my technical school training, it was a little over a year.
Okay. With the basic training, were you allowed contact with your family?
We got weekly phone calls. Usually every Sunday we got to call family and just kind of talk to them like, hey, this is what's going on. How are things back home? Really just those phone calls. We were also able to write letters, but we could write as many letters as we want, but we only got our letters back once a week.
Right. Do you think that was the most difficult part, or?
Not really. It was different just because you're going to communication with these people day in, day out all the time to this very limited frequency. But it kind of helps you prepare for that way whenever you're deployed or you're stationed overseas or anything like that, being able to kind of limit those communications just because of time differences and different obligations.
Okay, so after basic training, you joined the 316th Training Squadron, correct?
That is correct.
You mentioned that San Angelo was the location,
Yes.
and you mentioned how rural that was. Did that impact any of your time there? Did it influence any of your thoughts or anything like that?
It made me really not like Texas that much. The main reason is like it was a very small town. I think there was one strip mall with like 3 different shops in it, so it was very small. But other than that, like I like keeping to myself. I like hanging out with my friends and just kind of like doing whatever we can. So it made it easy once I got there and I got adapted to like the friends that I did have through training, for us to be able to build that camaraderie and become closer friendships. So that way we can do things that we like doing instead of just kind of filling the void with whatever we can.
Right, understandable. I think a lot of people from small towns build relationships with their friends in a stronger way.
Exactly.
Can you explain what you did here or what the goal was?
At the training?
The 316th Training Squadron, yes.
So all that was kind of getting us to dip our toes into like what our actual career field would be.
Mm-hmm.
So we were in trainings all the way from like 7 o'clock in the morning to about 5 o'clock in the evening. We were still doing like our customs and courtesies that we would learn in the military. So we were still doing all of our marching. We were still doing all of our PT. And this was really just kind of getting us ready to go into the actual operational Air Force instead of being in that training status.
Okay. And you mentioned you were here for a year, correct?
That is correct.
All right. And can you describe the typical day? I mean, you kind of, if you could add a little bit more detail.
All right. So it kind of varied between seasons. Like whenever it was warm, we would do PT in the evenings. And so it'd be about 5:30 right after we get out of class. In the mornings, we'd wake up at 4 o'clock, go out there, do our mandatory physical training, go back home or to our dorms, get showered, cleaned up, eat breakfast, and then make sure that we're in formation by 6:30 to march to class. So that way we get started at 7. And then from there we go into class until about 4:30 or 5 o'clock. We'd march back to our squadrons, and that's where we do our final formation for announcements and everything.
Okay. So now I'm going to talk about your service.
Okay.
You were part of the 450th Intelligent Squadron, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. And where was this stationed?
This was Ramstein Air Base in Kaiserslautern, Germany.
And for how long were you there?
I was there for 3 years.
Oh, wow. How did it feel to live in a country besides America?
It was a little different starting off. I'd never traveled outside of the country, so it was a huge culture shock. But most people think that Germans are not very friendly, but they're actually very welcoming to us because we've brought a lot of like revenue and everything into their country, especially in that area. So it was nice to see them responsive to us because I didn't live on base. I lived out in the community with all the Germans. So it was very nice for them to be responsive to us and be like, hey, if you need anything, let us know. We're kind of here for you. And also the same for us in that same aspect.
I see. Did you feel out of place in the culture?
No, because I tried to adapt. So like I tried to learn German. I tried to learn the different types of food. So that way we had me actually trying to show interest and try to be involved in the community. And so they kind of took up to that and were like, oh, you actually care. So I think that made it a little bit easier for me, other than people who wouldn't try and go out and embrace the culture.
Right, I see it. It seems like mindsets are very important to you.
Yes.
So then you transferred to the 24th Intelligence Squadron?
Mm-hmm.
Was this in the same location?
Yes, it was.
How long did you stay there?
I kind of split time in between the two. So
Okay.
I was still there for like the total of the 3 years, but I did work in both squadrons to help out fill mission needs.
Okay, was there a very big difference between this and the other one in Germany?
No.
Okay. At the end of your time in Germany, did you feel a connection with the place?
Definitely. It's a different culture from being born and raised in the South, and then you go over there and it's a completely different culture. Um, I learned that I actually like the more European culture than I do the South, just because it's a little bit formidable for our generation and everything.
Completely understandable. Do you plan to visit again?
Most definitely.
That's great. Your final unit was the 31st Intelligence Squadron at Fort Gordon, Augusta, correct?
That is correct.
Right. So, what was this unit involved in?
So we worked in military intelligence operations.
Okay. Could you describe your typical day there?
Typical day there is a little bit more lax than it was in Germany. We were on schedule 7 to 3. We'd go in, we'd do our work, do anything that was passed down from the higher ranking officers down to us. And from there, we just kind of like disseminate the work among our working groups, and that's what we did.
Okay. Did you enjoy more of the relaxation here?
No, I like being more fast paced. I like to keep busy, and when you kind of have like that lull in time, it kind of makes people start slacking off and kind of lagging on what they're actually supposed to be doing.
Understandable. So, can you please describe the 2 missions you were involved in?
So the missions I was involved in, the overall big picture was the global war on terrorism, obviously, because that's what we're dealing with right now. So I worked on Operation Inherent Resolve and Operation Enduring Freedom. So what that is those are operations that are being taken out in the Middle East. And for our job, we just, again, worked military intelligence trying to figure out what we can.
Okay. How did the stress of these missions compare to the stress in training?
Training kind of taught you the overall stress, kind of like this is what you're going to be dealing with. You just kind of have to learn and roll with the punches. The specific stresses that you dealt with when working with these operations is there's a lot of cultural differences, different biases, and everything that you're going to be dealing with. So you kind of had to step away from your own mental image of what this actually is and put yourself actually in the mission. All right, this is the East. This is different than what we're thinking over here in the U.S. and everything. So we had to kind of embrace that Middle Eastern culture and mindset for us to be able to understand what was actually going on over there.
And you mentioned how culture plays a big part in your differences and how you adapt. My other question was, how was the stress compared to your life before you even enlisted?
I wouldn't say it was necessarily a completely different set of stress. I think it was just different aspects put into it. Before I joined, I didn't even know this was going on. I knew that we had issues with the war on terrorism and everything, but to me, it didn't play any part of my life because I wasn't seeing it directly.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas now that I've been in, I've done those missions and everything, I kind of understand more of how the world is operating just to deal with the terrorism that we see going on.
I see. So how did you deal with this stress, or how did you see others deal with this stress?
A lot of it came from working in those missions. You kind of create close-knit groups to be oh man, I couldn't deal with this today. Oh yeah, I understand. Let me kind of talk to you about it. So it's kind of that camaraderie that I brought up earlier. Having those support groups to be able to talk about this information with and be hey, how are you feeling with this? And a lot of it just goes back and plays on just having those people that you can outlet to and actually communicate with to be I'm having a hard time with this. I don't know how to deal with it. And then be able to reciprocate and be all right, well, let's talk about this. Let's kind of figure out this. So it kind of just helped out to just have that outlet to be able to disseminate what you're actually feeling, and then you can take it back in and everything as well.
Right. So unit morale was very important.
Very.
Right. So what was your highest rank that you achieved?
I was an E5, so I was a staff sergeant.
Have you ever experienced psychological issues caused by your military service?
Yes.
Okay. Have you sought treatment for that?
I have.
Okay. Would you like to discuss that at all?
Really, the big thing was switching back over into the civilian life, trying to differentiate between how I dealt with things in the military and how I deal with things now as a civilian. The biggest thing was that I have support groups outside of the military as well. The biggest thing was the VMSS office here that helps with veterans and military service people, and just having that support group again just to help out whenever you need it.
I'm glad that you have that. Do you think the military deals with psychological issues adequately?
I would say yes. The biggest thing is just getting the people who are having those issues to understand that they have the issue and to go get it taken care of.
To actually understand and accept it.
Exactly.
Is there anything else we've left out of your military service that you'd like to mention?
No, I think we've covered it.
All right.
So few quick questions to end up the military service. When did you leave the military?
It was June of this year.
And did you have a certain reason why you decided to get out?
I wanted to pursue different career paths. Intelligence was cool, it was fun, but it wasn't my cup of tea. I like doing more active stuff, I like being physically active. So I kind of got out so that way I could pursue something different.
So now we're going to move over into college and post-military life. So after your military service, where did you and your wife end up moving and settling down?
So we actually stayed in the Fort Gordon, Augusta area. So we're currently living in Evans. The main reason we stay there is we bought a house. It's very similar to home, and we're really close to all of our family, within 2 to 6 hours of everyone.
So once you got out and you moved back home, what was the adjustment for you and your wife having you back home and your child?
The big thing was trying to figure out what to do with all my time. Because since I was a higher ranking, I was a supervisor, so I had 4, 5, 6 people underneath me that I was in charge of at all times. So then when I got out, I didn't know what to do with my time. I had so much time, it was weird, so I just kept busy. I started working like 4 jobs just so I could stay busy, and that's what I'm doing now.
Okay. The jobs that you said you had, what were those?
So really it's working at the YMCA, personal training, really just all over the place at different types of facilities, because obviously that's what I like to do, and that's what I'm going to pursue a career in.
Once you were back in civilian life, other than having ample amount of free time, were there any other really big differences for you?
Not really. Like, probably the biggest one was not necessarily having a time schedule for everything. It's like I didn't have to make sure I was at place A at a certain time frame or anything like that. I kind of had more free time to fit things in wherever I wanted to.
Was there any really part of civilian life that you found difficult coming back to?
No.
So did you have the idea of coming to college right towards the end of your military career? Was that ever an idea that you ever had?
So while I was in the military, I still worked towards a degree. Mm-hmm. So I was still doing schooling all throughout my 7 years. But more within the last year and a half of my military enlistment, I was like, all right, I really need to get dedicated, kind of figure out what I'm going to finish and get a degree in. So I would say probably the last year and a half is when I really finally decided what I was going to do as far as college goes.
What did your wife think about you coming back to college and finishing and getting a degree?
She definitely thought that it was a good idea and very important. The biggest thing is that she's going to miss all the benefits that came with being in the military. So that was, other than that, she was perfectly fine with me getting out, going back to school.
USC Aiken, did you always think about coming to USC Aiken? Why come here after you came back?
So I applied to a lot of schools in the Southeast, honestly. And the big thing was we already had a house in Evans, short drive up here. University of South Carolina as a whole is a reputable university across the board. So it just made sense to come here. It's a good, reputable school. It's close to where we were already living. So why not?
Okay. Do you have many interactions with our Veteran and Military Success Center?
I do.
Do they help you in any type of way? Do you get advised by them sometimes? What is your interaction with them?
So our interaction with them, or mine personally, is really just going to them with any issues I have, whether it be with advising, schoolwork, any issues that I have going on with like my school life or my personal life. And they have different branches that they work with to help us get like any sort of financial aid or scholarships or any sort of help that we need. They're there to help point us in the right direction.
Okay. What's your major?
Exercise science.
Why did you choose exercise science?
Like I said, I'm very interested in wellness and being active. So I want to fulfill a degree that I can actually do something where I'm on my feet, constantly going, being busy, and also working with the body to help get it to work in its best way you possibly can.
So for most students coming to college, they're straight out of high school, they're moving away from their families, so it's a really big adjustment for them. What was the adjustment for you?
The adjustment wasn't really anything crazy. For me, I always learned to roll with the punches. The military ups and moves you every couple years. So really, it wasn't much of an adjustment. It was just going from being military to civilian life. Coming into school, that experience helped with like time management and everything. So it almost makes it easier going from the military back into school.
So the military, their teaching techniques,
Yes.
are they a lot different than the teaching techniques that you have experienced here?
I would say yes. In the military, I don't want to say they dumb it down, but they make it very easy for I don't want to say the dumbest person in the room, but they try to keep it simple. So that way everyone kind of understands it across the board. Whereas here in college, a lot of professors think that you can teach yourself. In the military, they're like, all right, this is how you do A plus B equals C. Here, they're like, all right, here's the formula, figure out how to work it on your own.
I understand that. The college that you said you received in the military, did that transfer over to USC Aiken? Is that currently counting towards your degree that you're getting right now?
Credits did transfer. The only thing is that it's not going towards the credits that I need for my actual degree.
Okay.
The degree that I got from the military was in intelligence studies, whereas it's a completely different aspect of where I'm actually going now.
So do other students here, do your professors know that you are a veteran?
Some do, just because I've interacted with some of the other students in my classes and found out that they were also veterans, or they're like, oh, my father or my grandfather was in the military. Some of my professors do, just because they ask about experiences that I've had, like doing like exercise science stuff and type of physical stuff that I did in the military, what kind of injuries we dealt with a lot, things like that. So as far as that aspect goes, yes, but not to the sense where I'm flaunting it, saying I'm a veteran.
Do you think any of the students or your professors tend to treat you differently, knowing that you are a veteran?
I would say no.
Do you think that that's a good thing that they don't treat you differently, or would you prefer to be treated differently since you are a veteran?
I prefer that we're all treated the same, honestly. The only difference is that I took a commitment going one way. People could do it further on later on in life. You know, it's 6 one way, half a dozen another.
So coming back to civilian life after getting out of the military, did you notice, or did you tend to think that civilians and other college students are a little too sensitive?
Yes. Because the military has that stipulation of kind of being like hard and just kind of like stone faced and everything. I've understood that people are different. Some people take things more to heart. Some people are just kind of like, okay, brush it off, kind of just roll with it. So I have experienced that, and for me, I just kind of I take it as it is.
So, are there any things that you would tell now to a person that's just going into the military? Would you give them any advice, any type of tips, tricks?
The biggest thing I would say is that just let them know that a lot of it is politics. So a lot of it is rubbing elbows, getting to know your higher ranking officers. A big thing though is just do your job and do it well. Because once they understand that you can do your job and you're really good at it, they're going to show you more respect, and they're going to help you progress even further in your career.
Do you think society treats military members and veterans well? Do you think they should be treated with more respect?
I think overall it's done pretty well.
Hmm.
I don't like again. I don't me personally. I don't necessarily want to be held on a pedestal over anyone else because everyone has different things they're good at, different things that they succeed at. So as society as a whole, I believe that we're treated just as equal.
Do you think the GI Bill is adequate?
I would say yes, because like we're going to school, whether it's part time, full time, whatever. They're still helping provide for us because we've given X amount of time helping our country, serve our country. So they're just trying to help provide, set us up for better success further on down in the future.
Um, what do you like to do in your free time now?
Well, I don't have a lot of free time because I'm working full time student and a family, so it's all tied up. But I really like doing anything active, working out, being outside, uh, just anything like hiking, canoeing, just being active is anything that I could ever ask for.
So you're back in school now, you have your family. Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
5 years, I want to definitely be done with my bachelor's at least. The goal is to be done with my master's within the next 5 years and pursuing my doctorate in physical therapy.
Okay. Once you're out of school, you have all your degrees, where would you like to work?
Anywhere out west.
Mhm.
I would like to be working at a hospital or a rehab facility just so that way I can help patients kind of learn how to reuse things that like maybe they've lost motion in or anything like that. Just doing the physical therapy to try to help people get better after they've hurt themselves.
Would you like to go into the veteran? Would you like to help veterans with their physical?
I would do everything.
Everyone?
Yep.
Okay. So that's the end of that section, so I'll hand it over to Delilah.
All right, now we're going to do a little bit of reflection.
All right.
So overall, was your military service positive or negative?
I would definitely say positive.
Can you explain why?
Just because it taught me a lot of things about myself. Before I joined, I didn't think I was the brightest, didn't think I was very good at anything. But when I went into the military, it taught me a completely set of skills that I didn't even think that I had. It gave me opportunities to move overseas, see different cultures, meet different people from different aspects of life. And then also the biggest thing for me was create those friendships that are going to carry through the rest of my life.
What would you like most civilians to know about military service?
That's a difficult one. Really that we're no different than they are. Most people in the military don't think they're better than anyone else. They're just doing it. Yes, some people feel like it's a commitment to their country. Some people are doing it just for money. Some people are doing it for school benefits. We're just like anyone else. That's the big thing is I just want people to understand that we're the exact same as like you two sitting across from me. I'm doing the exact same thing you guys are.
You're just doing your lifestyle and your job.
Yep.
Okay. Do you think the military draft should be reinstated?
I wouldn't necessarily say the draft, but I would like to see that everyone serve at least a certain amount of time because it helps people kind of understand different career options that they have. Like you don't necessarily need a degree to do something in life. So that way, like you can learn the different skills that you can apply into anything else. So you could go working on computers, doing data analysis. You could learn how to do HVAC, working with air conditioners, things like that. And it's a school that's essentially paid for by the government. So you're learning these skills that you can later transfer over into life, whether it's in the military or outside the military.
It is law that men have to sign up and to fill out their information for a possible draft. Do you think women should be held responsible for doing this too?
I would say yes, just because women do play a huge role in our military as well. I've met a lot of phenomenal females in the military who are just as driven, if not more driven, than some of the men that I worked with. So I think it's good to have not necessarily that competition, but that equality that kind of drives each other to work harder and harder and harder.
How do you feel about people choosing not to vote?
I would say that it's kind of discouraging because like they're throwing it out to the public to be like, hey, we have this choice that we're letting you guys actually be a part of, and for them to just be like, oh well, it doesn't matter, it's not up to us really. It is. We still have a voice in everything that goes on. We can be like, I agree with this or no, I don't. So if you don't really vote, you're kind of like hurting the population, if you will, just because you're not helping get the small groups' voices out. So I feel like everyone should vote so that way we can all be heard evenly.
Right? Do you feel that realization more from being in the military and being a part of our country?
Not necessarily just from the military. It's just more of like a personal stance on that.
Well, I think that's it. Did we miss anything that you'd like to tell us about?
No, I think we covered everything.
All right. Thank you for your time, Chase, and thank you for your service.
All right, thank you guys.